The council's voice echoed across the cold stars. Their words were final, heavy with warning. Humanity must not interfere. Eris Prime is lost. Let it go. But humanity had never been good at listening to fear. They were born on a death world amid a place of storms, volcanoes, and endless struggle. Pain had been their first teacher, hope their second. And when the Council of Nine told them to stay away, something ancient stirred in their hearts. Something the other species of the galaxy had forgotten. Compassion mixed with defiance. The will to act even when told not to. Eris Prime was burning. Billions of innocent lives were trapped under the bombardment of the Zarth Dominion, a cruel empire of machines and monsters. The Galactic Council had decided to abandon it. They said saving the world would bring war to every corner of the stars. They said the risk was too high, but on Earth people didn't sleep that night. They watched the broadcasts, the smoke rising over silver cities, the desperate signals for help. The faces of alien children crying as their skies burned, and somewhere deep inside every human heart, a single word began to rise. Enough. Captain Elena Mara stood inside the launch chamber of the Vigilant Star, the flagship of the human relief fleet. She was young but carried eyes that looked older than war itself. Around her, crew members worked silently. Engineers, medics, soldiers, and volunteers. None were ordered to come. They came because they couldn't watch and do nothing. The Council had sent warning after warning. You are forbidden from entering Eris Prime space. Any ship that crosses that border will face consequences. Elena had read those messages 100 times. She had deleted them every time. As the engines warmed, she looked at the faces of her crew, people from Earth, Mars, and the colonies beyond. Some smiled nervously. Others prayed quietly. All of them had left families behind. They didn't know if they'd ever return. Command wants us to stand down, her first officer Jonah Reed said softly. Elena looked through the viewport at the dark beyond. Command isn't out there, Jonah, she said. Those people are. No one argued after that. When the fleet departed Earth's orbit, the stars looked brighter, almost as if they were watching. Thousands of ships rose through the black, their drives glowing like small suns. They weren't warships. Many were medical frigates, cargo carriers, even old mining haulers converted into rescue vessels. Humanity didn't come to conquer. They came to save. The Council watched in silence from their grand halls of crystal and light. Alien ambassadors whispered among themselves, calling humans reckless, naive, suicidal. But there was something in their voices too, a quiet envy. For all their power and wisdom, none of them had dared to move. Only the humans did. Days turned into weeks as the fleet crossed the void. The transmissions from Eris Prime grew weaker, filled with static and screams. The Zarth Dominion had unleashed their harvesters, giant machines that stripped cities of life and left behind oceans of glass. Every moment counted. On the 7th day, the fleet reached the edge of forbidden space. The stars here were dim, the light distorted by the wreckage of broken worlds. Elena stood at the command deck as the final warning came through, the Council's seal glowing crimson on the main screen. Humanity, stand down. You are in violation of Council law. Turn back immediately or face disconnection from the galactic network. This is your last warning. The bridge went silent. Even the hum of the engines felt distant. Jonah looked at her. If we cross that line, there's no going back. Elena's voice was calm. If we don't, no one will. She pressed the command key. All ships advance. And just like that, humanity crossed the line drawn by gods. The void ahead shimmered with the wrecks of alien fleets that had tried before and failed. But the humans didn't slow. They moved through the graveyard of giants, engines burning blue and bright. Eris Prime came into view, a wounded world wrapped in fire. The surface was covered in smoke and ruin, cities half buried beneath alien metal. The comm channels were filled with desperate cries for help, voices that cracked through static and fear. Every eye on the bridge turned to Elena. She didn't speak for a moment. Then softly, she said the words that would echo across the stars. "Let's bring them home." As the first human ships descended through the storm clouds of Eris Prime, the Dominion's sensors flared. The machines turned their gaze toward the intruders, and then, for the first time in years, the sky above, Eris Prime went silent, not from peace, but from awe, because humanity had arrived. The storm over Eris Prime was not made of water, it was ash. Black clouds rolled across the ruined sky, hiding the burning horizon beneath a shroud of smoke and sorrow. The ground trembled as the Zarth harvesters tore deeper into the planet's surface, feeding their machines with the remains of what once had been a world of light. And then, the humans came. From the edge of the void, hundreds of ships broke through the storm. Engines glowed blue-white like falling stars. For those still alive on the surface, it looked like heaven was opening, as if the stars themselves had chosen to fight for them. The people of Eris Prime watched from shattered towers and broken shelters. For years they had called for help. For years no one had answered. Until now. The voice came over the comm channels, firm but gentle. "This is the human relief fleet. Hold on. We're here." It was the first time anyone had said those words in a long, long time. Captain Elena Mara stood at the bridge of the Vigilant Star. Her face was pale in the glow of the main screen. Around her the crew worked fast, scanning for survivors, mapping enemy positions, deploying landing units. The ship trembled as it cut through the atmosphere. "Status?" she asked, her voice steady. "Defensive drones detected," Jonah reported. "Hundreds of them. The Dominion knows we're here." "Good," Elena said quietly. "Now they'll know what we are." The first wave of human dropships roared down through the smoke. Medical teams, engineers, and soldiers in old, scratched armor, all volunteers. Some carried weapons, others carried food and medicine. Every single one carried hope. When they landed, the ground shook. The air smelled like fire and metal. Lieutenant Sarah Lynn stepped out of her dropship into the ruins of Alaris City. She had never seen so much death. Bodies of different species lay scattered among broken glass and twisted steel. The air was heavy with dust and silence. But then she heard a sound on faint crying. She followed it into a collapsed building. There, under a beam, a small alien child hid, clutching a glowing pendant. Its eyes were wide with terror. When it saw her armor, it tried to crawl away. Sarah knelt down slowly and removed her helmet. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here to help." The child blinked, confused. It had never seen a human before, and only the monsters that had come before. When Sarah lifted the beam and carried the child out into the light, others began to emerge too. Families, wounded soldiers, and civilians who thought the universe had forgotten them. High above, the Vigilant Star fired its rail cannons. Blazing lines of energy struck the Dominion's harvesters, shattering their black hulls. The sky was filled with thunder, light, and fury. Jonah turned to Elena. "We're drawing a lot of attention." "They're regrouping," Elena nodded. "Then we hold the line. Evacuate as many as we can." Soon the human fleet was surrounded. The Dominion's ships, massive black triangles with red cores, began to close in. They had never faced humans before. They didn't understand what drove them. The Council sent one final message, desperate now. "Humanity, retreat. You cannot win. You will bring ruin to yourselves." But the message went unanswered, because humanity was too busy saving lives. On the surface, human medics carried the wounded through streets that glowed with fire. Pilots flew into storms to pick up survivors. Engineers rebuilt fallen shelters while artillery rained around them. Every act of kindness was an act of rebellion. Even the alien soldiers who once doubted them began to fight alongside the humans. For the first time, the people of Eris Prime believed in something again. In the command room, Elena stared at the growing number of red dots on the tactical map. The Dominion's fleet was multiplying, too many, too fast. They were preparing to wipe the humans out. "Ma'am," Jonah said quietly, "we can't hold this position much longer." Elena's eyes softened. "We were never meant to hold it. We were meant to give them time." Jonah frowned. "Time for what?" She smiled faintly. "For the others to believe." Outside, the Dominion unleashed its full fury. Missiles screamed through the sky. Explosions turned the horizon white. For a heartbeat, it looked as if humanity would vanish into flame, but they didn't. Human ships formed a wall of steel and light. They protected every evacuation transport, every wounded soul. The sky roared with human defiance, a sound the Dominion had never heard before. And when the smoke cleared, the invaders paused, because where there had once been fear, now there was silence, the kind of silence that comes before something greater. Across the galaxy, transmissions flickered. Species watched in disbelief as humans, fragile, reckless, small, stood against an empire that had swallowed whole worlds. And for the first time in centuries, hope spread faster than war. The humans had arrived and the sky had gone silent. The storm over Eris Prime had turned red. The fire from the Dominion's warships painted the clouds like open wounds in the sky. Every moment felt borrowed, every breath a challenge. The human fleet hung above the planet like a fragile wall of light, standing against a sea of darkness. Captain Elena Mara stared at the tactical display. Red dots, enemy ships, multiplied faster than they could count. The Dominion's fleet had arrived in full force. Giant black vessels shaped like blades were descending toward the planet. Her crew waited for her command. Their eyes carried fear, but behind it something stronger burned. The kind of courage that only appears when there's no turning back. "Open all channels," Elena said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking slightly. Jonah tapped the controls. "All frequencies are open, Captain." Elena stood tall. "This is Captain Elena Mara of the human fleet. We came here to save lives, not to start a war. But if you threaten those we protect, we will stand against you, no matter the cost." Her words traveled across the stars. For a brief moment there was silence. Then the Dominion replied, a cold, metallic voice that sent chills through the bridge. "You should have obeyed the council. You are flesh and dust. You will burn." And then the battle began. The sky exploded with light. Human ships moved like arrows weaving through enemy fire. The Dominion's weapons were powerful, precise, and merciless. But the humans fought differently. They fought with chaos, instinct, and heart. On the surface, Lieutenant Sarah Lynn and her ground team fought through the ruins of Alaris City. Drones screamed overhead, firing plasma bolts into the streets. The air was filled with smoke and screams, but she didn't stop. She was leading a group of survivors toward the evacuation zone. Children, elders, and wounded soldiers from a dozen alien races. "Keep moving," she shouted. "We're almost there!" A blast struck the building beside her, throwing her to the ground. Dust filled her lungs. Her armor was cracked, but when she looked up, she saw the child she had rescued before, the same one with the glowing pendant, struggling to help another alien stand. Even in terror, they were trying to help. Sarah forced herself up, pain burning in her side. "That's it," she whispered to herself. "That's why we're here." Above the city, the Vigilant Star was taking heavy damage. Sparks flew across the bridge. One engine was gone. Shields were failing. Jonah gritted his teeth as another explosion rocked the ship. "Engineering reports we've lost power to the lower decks," he said. Elena didn't hesitate. "Divert power from the forward cannons. Keep the shields up around the evacuation zone." "But we'll be defenseless," Jonah protested. She looked at him, eyes firm. "We're not here to survive, Jonah. We're here to make sure they do." The Vigilant Star turned its remaining power toward the planet. A shield of light spread across the sky, covering the evacuation sites below. It flickered and cracked under the Dominion's relentless assault. But it held, because humanity refused to let go. On the surface, Sarah looked up through the smoke and saw it, a glowing barrier stretching like a second sky. For a moment she forgot the pain, the noise, the fear. She saw only light. Then she heard a voice through her comm. "Ground team, this is the Vigilant Star. Evacuation transports are inbound. Hold your position," she smiled weakly. "You better hurry," she replied. At that moment the Dominion unleashed something new. From orbit, a massive beam of crimson energy began to form. A planetary annihilator. One strike would end everything. On the bridge, alarms screamed. Jonah's voice was filled with panic. "They're charging the main weapon. We can't stop it." Elena stared at the growing beam. Her heart pounded. Every choice led here onto this one moment. "Send all power to the main cannon," she ordered. Jonah blinked. "Captain, we'll overload." "Then we'll go out shining," she said softly. Her hand rested on the control. She thought of Earth, of oceans, of sunlight, of children laughing under blue skies. Then she pressed the command. The Vigilant Star fired. A beam of white light shot through the dark, pure and blinding. It cut across the void, colliding with the Dominion's weapon mid-charge. The explosion was so bright that even the clouds over Eris Prime turned white. When the light faded, half the Dominion fleet was gone, and so was the Vigilant Star. For a long time there was only static on the comm channels. Then faintly a voice broke through. "Jonas, evacuation complete. Survivors secure. Captain Elena." She stayed behind. Every surviving ship turned toward the planet. The Dominion was retreating. For the first time their machines hesitated. On the ground, Sarah looked up again. The sky was still burning worse, but it was quiet. The battle had stopped. The enemy had withdrawn. She held the child close and whispered, tears in her eyes, "She did it." They all did. Above them, the stars flickered like candles in the wind. Humanity had fought not for power, but for life itself. And because of that, the sky had gone silent once more. Silence. Real silence. Not the kind that comes from peace, but from loss. After the final explosion faded, the sky over Eris Prime was empty. The Dominion fleet had retreated beyond the stars, leaving behind only drifting wrecks and clouds of glowing dust. The battle was over, but victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like heartbreak. The Vigilant Star, once the brightest ship in the fleet, was gone. No signal, no beacon, only fragments of light where it had stood against the impossible. On the surface, Lieutenant Sarah Lynn stood among the ruins, her armor scorched, her hands trembling. Around her, the survivors of Eris Prime, alien and human alike, gathered under the silent sky. They had been saved, yes, but at a cost that few could yet understand. The air smelled of metal and ashes. The wind carried the faint echo of burning machines, and somewhere in that stillness Sarah whispered, "Captain Elena, you did it." Her voice broke. Jonah Reed was alive, barely. He had been rescued from one of the surviving life pods that fell from orbit after the Vigilant Star's final blast. His body was weak, his arm burned, but his eyes were still sharp, haunted by the memory of what he had seen. When they found him, Sarah knelt beside the pod. "Jonah, can you hear me?" He opened his eyes slowly, his voice rough. "She stayed till the end. She never left the bridge." Sarah's throat tightened. "I know." He looked at the sky above them, now calm and strangely clear. "She said we'd go out shining. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." Days passed. Human engineers worked with alien survivors to rebuild shelters. Medical teams moved through the ruins, treating wounds that went deeper than flesh. Children who once cried in fear now followed the humans curiously, touching their armor, listening to their strange earth songs. Even the alien soldiers who had doubted them began to help, clearing debris, carrying supplies, tending the sick. The humans had come as strangers. Now they were family. But behind every act of kindness was a shadow, the memory of those who didn't return. Every night when the fires burned low, the survivors would gather beneath the open sky. There they placed a single beacon in the center of the camp. It was built from the broken parts of the Vigilant Star's hull. Twisted metal turned into a monument of light. Sarah stood before it one evening, her eyes reflecting the flickering glow. Around her, hundreds of survivors watched in silence. Jonah stepped forward, still limping, holding a small data core in his hands. "This," he said softly, "was recovered from the ship's black box. It contains Captain Elena Mara's last transmission." The crowd grew still. Jonah inserted the core into the beacon. A faint blue projection flickered to life. A ghostly image of Elena, her face calm, her voice quiet but strong. "To whoever finds this, know that we came because silence was not an option. We couldn't turn away, not when lives still called for help. We were told to stay home, to obey. But obedience means nothing when innocence is dying. If we fall here, let it be known. Humanity did not come to conquer. We came to stand. And if the stars ever go dark again, remember this: we are the light." The recording ended. No one spoke for a long time. The wind blew gently through the ruins, carrying the sound of quiet weeping. Not of despair, but of gratitude. Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. She looked at Jonah. She knew, didn't she? He nodded. She always knew the price. The next day, the council finally arrived. Dozens of sleek silver ships descended from orbit, carrying ambassadors from across the galaxy. They came too late, as they always did. Their envoys stepped onto the ruined soil of Eris Prime and looked around, their faces pale. One of them, a tall being with crystal skin, approached Sarah and Jonah. "You were warned not to interfere," the envoy said coldly. "You disobeyed direct council command. You could have destroyed us all." Sarah's voice was quiet but unyielding. "And yet, we didn't. We saved them." Jonah stepped beside her. "You stayed in your halls while children died." "We couldn't." The envoy looked around, at the alien civilians helping the human medics, at the rebuilt shelters made from scrap metal and hope. Slowly, its tone softened. "You risked extinction." Sarah met its gaze. "That's what life is. Risking everything for something worth saving." The envoy said nothing more. That night, the humans received a signal from Earth. It was faint, but steady, a transmission filled with pride and sorrow. The message was simple: the whole galaxy is watching. You made them remember what it means to care. Sarah looked up at the stars. They seemed brighter now, alive again. She thought of Captain Elena, of her words, "We are the light." And for the first time since the battle ended, she smiled. Humanity had defied every order, every warning, every law. They had bled and burned and lost so much, but because of them, Eris Prime lived, and across the stars, other worlds, forgotten, broken, Fragima began to hope again. Because when humanity arrived, the silence ended. The days after the battle felt like dreams caught between pain and light. Eris Prime was still scarred, its cities broken, its air heavy with ash, but life had begun to return. Where there had been smoke, now there were small fires of warmth and food. Where there had been fear, laughter began to echo again. The survivors rebuilt slowly, side by side with the humans who had saved them. Every hammer strike, every lifted stone, every planted seed was a small act of rebellion against despair. Lieutenant Sarah Lynn walked through the camp at dawn, her steps light but her eyes distant. The sky above was pale blue again, soft and quiet. She stopped near the beacon built from the remains of the vigilant star. The metal still shimmered faintly, like it remembered what it once was. Jonah Reed stood beside it, adjusting a small transmitter. His arm was still bandaged, his movements slow, but his face carried a calm kind of strength. "Morning," Sarah said softly. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Morning. Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her, standing on that bridge, smiling. Like she knew it would all end this way." Jonah's voice was quiet. Maybe she did. Maybe she always knew what we didn't, that sometimes sacrifice is the only language the stars understand. Sarah looked up at the dawn sky. Then the stars will remember her. Jonah nodded. They already do. Across the galaxy, the story of Eris Prime spread like wildfire. The Council had tried to hide it at first, to bury the tale under silence and politics. But they couldn't stop the voices. Refugees from Eris Prime carried the truth with them. Humanity came when no one else did. Humanity fought when all others turned away. Soon, entire systems began to question the Council's decisions. Messages poured in from worlds once thought lost, worlds asking for help not from the Council but from humans. The Council of Nine called an emergency meeting. Their chambers, once symbols of unity, now felt heavy with unease. Holoscreens flickered with images of Eris Prime's ruins, of humans working beside aliens, of the beacon glowing in the dark. One of the elder counselors, a silver-skinned being named Vareth, spoke first. They disobeyed direct command. They endangered the treaty, and yet they succeeded. Another, a crystalline envoy from the Mural system, replied, "They did what we would not. We called it foolishness. Perhaps it was courage." A silence settled over them. For the first time in centuries, the Council had no words strong enough to hide their shame. Back on Eris Prime, a new day began. Children played in the ruins of old markets, their laughter echoing through streets that had once been filled with screams. Human engineers worked with alien scientists to rebuild the planet's power grid. Together they raised towers of light, not for war but for peace. Sarah and Jonah often sat at the edge of the city when night fell, watching the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, glowing like a field of diamonds. One evening, Jonah carried a small device, a message recorder. "What's that?" Sarah asked. He smiled faintly. "Something for Earth. The Council hasn't decided what to do with us yet, but I want them to know what happened here. Not the military report. The truth." He pressed the button and began to speak. "This is Commander Jonah Reed of the Human Relief Fleet. Eris Prime lives. Humanity disobeyed every order to stay away, and because of that, millions were saved. We fought, we lost, we bled, but we found something greater, unity. Not the kind written in treaties, but the kind born in fire and shared tears. Tell Earth this: we are no longer just from one planet. We are from the stars we saved." When he finished, Sarah whispered, "She would have been proud." Jonah's eyes softened. She'd say it wasn't pride we should feel, just peace. They sat in silence for a long time, the beacon's light flickering gently nearby. Weeks later, a fleet arrived, not Dominion ships, but something unexpected. Vessels from dozens of worlds approached Eris Prime, carrying supplies, doctors, and volunteers. They came not under the Council's command, but by their own choice. One alien commander said simply, "We heard what your kind did. We could not stay silent." For the first time, the stars themselves seemed to move closer. Together, they began to rebuild entire cities. The once dead planet became a symbol of something greater, of unity born through sacrifice. And everywhere across the galaxy, people began to whisper a new saying. When the sky went silent, humanity spoke. That night, Sarah returned to the beacon one last time. She placed her hand against its warm metal and closed her eyes. "Captain," she whispered, "we kept your promise. They're safe. You were right. We are the light." The wind stirred around her, soft and gentle, carrying the faint hum of the stars. It almost felt like a voice, far away but kind, whispering back, "Keep it burning." Sarah smiled through her tears. Above her, the stars gleamed brighter than ever, and across the endless night, countless worlds remembered that day. The day humanity ignored every order, defied every command, and still came anyway. They remembered the light that fell from Earth's skies. They remembered the courage that silenced the heavens. Because when humanity arrived, the sky went silent, and hope began to sing. Years passed, but the memory of Eris Prime did not fade. It lived in stories, in songs, in the quiet whispers of those who had seen the fire and the light. Children across the galaxy grew up hearing the tale of the humans, the ones who disobeyed, who came when no one else did, and who stood against the dark even when the stars themselves were silent. For many, humanity had become a symbol, not of power but of heart. They were the species that risked everything for strangers. They were the spark that reminded others what it meant to care. Eris Prime had been rebuilt into something new. Once a graveyard of war, it now stood as a meeting world, open to every race, every traveler, every dreamer. Its new capital was named Mara City, after the woman who had given everything to save it. Lieutenant Sarah Lynn, now Commander Sarah Lynn, often stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt beacon, watching the ships come and go. Cargo haulers, medical cruisers, science vessels, all passing peacefully through the same skies that had once burned red. Sometimes she would close her eyes and still hear the echoes, the thunder of cannons, the screams, and then the silence that followed when humanity arrived. It wasn't something she could ever forget. It had become part of who she was. Jonah Reed still worked beside her. His body bore scars from that day, but his spirit remained unbroken. He had become Earth's ambassador to Eris Prime, a bridge between humanity and the countless species now calling the planet home. "Looks different now, doesn't it?" he said one evening as they stood together watching the sunset. The horizon glowed gold and violet, reflecting off towers of glass and green gardens. Sarah smiled softly. "It almost feels like it never happened." Jonah nodded. "And yet every time I see that sky I remember the silence, the kind that comes when something sacred is happening." Sarah turned toward him. "Do you ever wonder if she's out there somewhere?" "Elena," he took a slow breath. "Every day," he pointed toward the stars. "You see that sector? That's where the Vigilant Star was last detected. No wreckage, no signal. Just gone. Maybe the ship burned completely. Or maybe she's still out there," Sarah finished softly. Jonah smiled faintly. "If anyone could make it, it would be her." Across the galaxy, humanity had changed everything. The Council of Nine was no longer what it once was. Its authority had cracked. Too many worlds had stopped obeying silence. They had seen what humanity had done, and they wanted to act too. Now, when cries for help reached the stars, ships answered. Not just human ones, but vessels from dozens of races working together. It was no longer forbidden to care. The universe was healing, but not everyone was pleased. In the far reaches of the Orion Veil, the remnants of the Dominion still gathered. They had not forgotten their defeat. They spoke of vengeance and of the day they would return. But even among them there was fear now. The name human had become something powerful, something whispered like a warning. Do not wake them. They will come. And if they came, the sky would go silent again. One night Sarah received an urgent signal while working late in the communications bay. The beacon's lights flickered and the message played. An old static-filled voice almost lost to time. "This is the Vigilant Star. Coordinates unknown. Survivors aboard. Holding position beyond the veil." Sarah froze. Her heart raced. The message was weak, but it was real. The signal matched the ship's old code. Captain Elena Mara's ship. She called Jonah immediately. Within minutes he stood beside her, eyes wide. "Play it again," he said. The recording crackled once more. "If you can hear this, tell them Eris Prime lives. The light still burns. We'll find our way home." The voice was faint but unmistakable. Elena's voice, calm, steady, alive. Sarah covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "She made it." Jonah exhaled slowly, his throat tight. After all this time. They looked out at the stars beyond the window, the same stars where she had vanished years ago. Somewhere out there, the Vigilant Star was still drifting, carrying the woman who had taught them all what courage truly meant. "Should we tell the council?" Sarah asked softly. Jonah shook his head. "No, not yet. The council talks. Humanity acts." He smiled faintly. "We'll go ourselves." Sarah grinned through her tears. "You're still as reckless as she was." "Maybe that's why she picked us," Jonah replied. Preparations began the very next day. A small expedition fleet, part human, part alien, would set course for the Orion Veil to find the Vigilant Star. Word spread quickly, and hope rose again across the galaxy. As their ships prepared for launch, Sarah stood beneath the great beacon. She touched the metal one last time and whispered, "We're coming, Captain." The engines roared, shaking the earth beneath her feet. Light burst through the dawn sky, and once again, humanity rose into the stars, not for war this time, but for reunion. And across every world that had ever known darkness, people looked up and watched those ships leave. They knew the story by heart now, the story that had changed everything. When humanity arrived, the sky went silent. But this time, the silence was different. It was not fear, it was reverence. It was the quiet before a miracle. The stars were quiet, again. But it was not the silence of death this time, and it was the silence of anticipation. Every listening post, every relay station across the galaxy had turned its antennas toward the Orion Veil. Everyone was waiting for one thing: the return of the Vigilant Star, the expedition. Fleet moved through the dark like a line of silver fireflies. The lead ship, Aurora's Path, carried Commander Sarah Lynn and Ambassador Jonah Reed. Their faces were older now, marked with years of scars and memories, but their hearts still burned with the same fire that once carried humanity beyond the Council's commands. Jonah stood at the front viewport, staring into the endless black. "We're close," he said softly. Sarah nodded, watching the radar flicker with faint readings. "Signal's getting stronger." "She's out there," the crew said nothing. They all knew what this meant. Finding the Vigilant Star wasn't just a rescue mission. It was about bringing back a piece of history, a piece of humanity itself. Hours passed. The fleet glided deeper into the Orion Veil, where stars faded behind thick curtains of cosmic dust. Then suddenly, through the haze, a faint light appeared, steady and rhythmic. "A pulse, the beacon," Sarah whispered. As the ships approached, the outline of a massive vessel emerged from the mist, cracked, scorched, and silent, yet unmistakably alive. It was her, the Vigilant Star. The docking clamps connected with a heavy thud. The airlock hissed as Sarah and Jonah stepped inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The corridors were frozen in time. Control panels flickered weakly, and the walls bore marks of battle long past. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice echoing. "This is Commander Lynn of the Aurora's Path. We're here to bring you home." For a moment there was no reply, just the hum of dead machinery. Then a soft mechanical sound, a door sliding open deeper inside. Jonah and Sarah followed the sound until they reached the bridge. And there, standing beside the shattered captain's chair, was a figure in a worn-out uniform, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes bright as stars. Captain Elena Mara. She smiled faintly, as if she had been waiting for them all her life. "Took you long enough," she said. Sarah's breath caught. "Captain, you're alive." "Barely," Elena replied with a quiet laugh. "The ship's been running on emergency power for years. Most of my crew didn't make it, but we stayed. We held position because we knew someone would come." Jonah stepped closer, his voice trembling. "We thought you were gone." "I almost was," Elena admitted. "But something kept me going. The thought that maybe, just maybe, Eris Prime still lived." Sarah smiled through her tears. "It does. It's beautiful now. They named the city after you." Elena's eyes glistened. She turned to the main window, where distant stars glowed faintly through the haze. "Then it was worth it. Every second." Hours later, the Vigilant Star came back to life. Engineers from the fleet worked tirelessly, reactivating systems and restoring power. When the engines finally roared, their sound echoed like thunder through the void, a heartbeat returning after a long sleep. As the fleet turned toward home, transmissions flooded across the galaxy. "The Vigilant Star has been found. Captain Elena Mara lives. Humanity has returned. On every world, people stopped to listen. On Eris Prime, crowds filled the streets staring at the skies as the ships broke through the clouds. The sound of engines rolled over the planet like a song. In Mara City, a boy asked his mother, "Is that them?" She smiled softly. "Yes, child. That's them, the ones who made the sky go silent." When Elena stepped onto the rebuilt ground of Eris Prime, the crowd erupted. Thousands of voices shouted her name. Alien and human alike cheered as she walked forward. Her once-torn uniform replaced with the banner of unity, the emblem of the new Galactic Accord, born from humanity's defiance. Jonah and Sarah stood beside her as she gazed at the new city. Towers of light, rivers of silver, people of every race living together. "It's more beautiful than I imagined," she whispered. Jonah smiled. "You made it possible." Elena looked up at the sky, tears glimmering in her eyes. "No," she said softly. "We made it possible." That night, a ceremony was held in her honor. Lights from every world shimmered above, projected into the clouds, forming a sea of constellations. Elena gave her final message to the galaxy, her voice calm, filled with the same strength that once defied the Council's orders. "We were told not to come. We were told to stay silent. But silence is not peace. It is the death of compassion. Humanity came not to conquer, but to remind the stars that mercy is power. If you ever hear a cry for help, do not wait for permission. Do not wait for orders. Just go." The crowd stood in silence, listening. And then, one by one, they began to cheer, a sound that grew until it shook the heavens. As night fell, Elena walked alone to the old beacon tower. She looked up at the stars, remembering every face, every sacrifice. The sky was silent again, but now it was a silence full of life. Jonah joined her quietly. "It's peaceful, isn't it?" Elena smiled faintly. "Yes, the kind of peace you earn." They stood together, watching the stars shimmer like candles in the dark. Humanity had once been told to stay out of the war. They had ignored the Council. They had gone anyway. And because they did, the galaxy learned to feel again. As the wind whispered through the towers of Mara City, a single phrase echoed across the stars, a reminder, a legend, a promise. When humanity arrived, the sky went silent. But this time, it was the silence of peace. And it would last for generations.